Now, 3.5 years ago, I think when the projected budget deficit was $16.5 billion, I don't think anyone envisioned that we will be standing here today with a budget that has zero deficit. Zero deficit. That is an extraordinary accomplishment. And the only way that was possible is because of Democrats and Republicans working together. Every year, we cut it down, the budget deficit, from $16.5 billion down to 12, down to 8, down to 4, and this year down to 0. And I want to thank the Republicans, my Republican friends, for having done such a great job and insisting that it is 0, that the budget deficit is 0. And I want to thank our Democratic friends for insisting to protect the very important programs like education and other programs. And this is why we have so many education leaders here today standing behind us, and also law enforcement leaders that are standing behind us. So I want to thank them also for protecting those very important programs. Because we all know that a budget is not just numbers. It is a reflection of the values of California. And we fully fund, for instance, education, kindergarten through 12th grade and higher education. We fully fund public safety, which is extremely important. We want to thank all the representatives that are here today from public safety and for doing such a great job. We wanted to protect you. And we also wanted to pay down our debt, including the $1 billion of prepayment that we made. And we set aside a reserve fund of $4.1 billion, which is the highest in history. And yes, for the 4th year in a row, we did not raise taxes.
Governor, you talk about the budget system being flawed, fundamentally flawed. Would you favor scrapping the 2/3 requirement that's currently in place?
I think that we have to look at all the different ideas. I think there will be many, many different ideas, good ideas that will come forward when we, all get together, the legislative leaders and us, and also people maybe that have struggled, previous governors, for instance. We can bring them in. Everyone will have good ideas, and we will look at it. I think that to go to a simple majority maybe will be one of the ideas that we will be kicking around, but definitely there will be many other ideas that may be much better.
Governor, there's a projected deficit next year of $5 billion, and some of the legislative leaders are saying that they should begin work on it early. Do you agree? Would you expect that to happen?
Well, first of all, I think that it will be against 0 next year. I think that's what we always should shoot for from here on out. And I think that, yes, there's a projected structural deficit, and we're going to deal with that. If we see the revenues go up, then we don't have to deal with it early. If we see that our revenues are coming in lower than anticipated, then we can again all sit down and start looking at it in a fiscally responsible way. Anyway, as you know, we are facing a very tough situation, but with tough times come historic opportunities. And I'm convinced that the legislature will help in order to take this temporary problem that we have and turn it into a permanent solution, a permanent victory for the people of California by joining me to enact true budget reform. We simply cannot have a budget system where revenues and spending are tied together, not tied together. We must rise to the challenge and fix California's budget system once and for all. As a matter of fact, we are now $4.6 billion short of the projected revenues for 2007 and 2008. The result is that we have a $3.3 billion hole in the current budget, which is projected to grow to $14.5 billion by the end of the next fiscal year, which is June of 2009, if we don't do anything about it. Now, but I want everyone to understand that the economy is not the villain here. The economy contributes a little bit to the problem, but the villain is the system itself, the budget system. On the spending side, the action is automatic. Formulas, population, and caseload just drive the costs up without us doing absolutely anything. But to control those costs, it takes a lot of work. So to close this budget gap, I'm proposing two actions. First, my new budget will reduce almost every state program by 10% next year, or as close as possible. And in a fiscal emergency session, a special session of the legislature that I'm calling the day, I'm proposing to start many of those cuts this fiscal year, 2007-2008. That includes eliminating cost of living adjustments and reducing a portion of the appropriation to schools that are above Proposition 98 guarantee. Second, I'm using the authority given to me under Proposition 57 and 58 to both suspend next year's prepayments of the economic recovery bonds and to sell the remaining bonds to rebuild this year's reserve. Now, some might say that it sounds easy to just cut across the board by 10%, but let me tell you, it is very difficult. I can see every single person hurt by these cuts, and I understand how difficult they will be for many, many people. But the old way of balancing the budget by just grabbing money anywhere we can, if it is from transportation or from local government or pension plans, that time is over. As I said in my State of the State speech, we took those options off the table because they never solved anything in the first place. They just created more problems. What we have to do is be fiscally responsible and to spend only the money that we have. I know that some people say that we should just raise taxes in order to fill the gap, but it would be wrong to raise taxes on people to cover Sacramento's overspending. And also, since we have not yet fixed our budget system, especially we have not yet first done everything we can in order to stop the spending. Now that brings me to the last part of what I want to talk about here today, and that is true budget reform. The budget underpins everything that we do as a state. It has to be solid and it has to be responsible. A state as great as ours should not approach every budget season as if we were on a roller coaster thrill ride where people have to hold on for dear life. We cannot give schools all the money and then just take it away and steal it from healthcare or transportation projects. We cannot have the same fights year after year if we should increase taxes or if we should cut the spending. We have to control the budget because right now the budget is controlling us. Right now, we are spending, for instance, $400 to $600 million a month more than we are taking in. And we can do nothing about it. I think it is total madness. No business or family could stay afloat with that kind of budgeting. Our budget system needs to be fixed, plain and simple. And as you remember, I've proposed this, of course, to fix the budget several times before. As a matter of fact, right after I came into office, we proposed it, and then again in 2005. In both cases, they did not pass. So now I will try again. And I want to promise you that I will do everything I can to be as inclusive as possible and as open-minded as possible. We want to work with both of the parties to resolve this problem once and for all. Because we have two choices: more of the same dysfunction and paralysis, or real budget reform. I call for real budget reform. The constitutional amendment that I am proposing is modeled after the budget process used in Arkansas for the last 60 years. And on top of that, we will also put in place, when revenues grow, Sacramento will not be able to spend all of that money. We would instead set it aside in a rainy day fund, or a revenue stabilization fund, as they call it, that will do just what the name implies, and that is to stabilize the budget in down years. If this system had been in place for this past decade, we would not be in the mess that we're in. The budget would be more manageable, we wouldn't have this billions of dollars of deficit, and we would have been spared of a lot of the fights that poisoned the air in the Capitol, and we would have had more time to spend on very important issues like education or infrastructure or on healthcare.